Good afternoon, everyone. This is Tractorman 44. This is an 800 Ford, 1955 800 Ford, 172 cubic inch overhead valve 4-cylinder gasoline engine. It's really been a good runner over the years. I've had it for, my gosh, pretty close to 40 years by now, I guess. Never really had any major issues with it. But the other day, it didn't have any fire at all, and we put a set of points in. That thing just fired right up and run perfectly. All I had available was those cheap components. Well, it ran really good. Fired up perfect, ran, accelerated, everything fine. For just about a half a load of wood. He was sawing with this cutoff saw. And doggone thing, lost spark, wouldn't hit a lick. So the other day we loaded up and brought it over and put it in the shed. And those brand new points I put in, they really do not have an hour and a half or 2 hours of runtime. And those points will not pass electric. So I filed those points with a regular bona fide points filing file. Bumped the starter, thing fired right up. But it's got a real weak spark and it's not running very good at all. It just won't accelerate. Pull the carburetor off, service the carburetor, everything's perfect, everything is fine. But I got a real weak yellow spark, not good at all. So we've got something going on in the electrical circuit. Could be something as simple as a bad ground, I don't know. But at any rate, I've ordered correct components and we're going to go ahead and do that. But in the meantime, I'm going to give the wiring and stuff on this thing a little freshening up. At least we're starting to get her dress off. Got one side apart anyway. You can see a little bird nest growing right up there in the middle. Right up in there by the ignition switch. You can see our bird nest a little bit better. This time to take the gas tank off. I got a leaking petcock. One of my local farm stores says $66 for that stupid petcock. But anyway, there's just a few bolts you got to undo to take this off, and of course the fuel line. But it should be ready to lift off. I drained most of the gas out of it, but there's still a couple of gallons in there, which adds 15, 16 pounds to it. If I didn't have this fancy custom exhaust pipe on there, that wouldn't have been quite so difficult. But I didn't want to lift it off of that side because the shoulder I got to lift with kind of hurts a little bit. I got a new distributor cap copper cord plug wires, spark plugs, dust cover, and another set of points and condensers. Hopefully it's going to be a higher quality, but it was from Ag State Suppliers, but it had a 5-star rating. And I figured any of the cheap components that will burn out in no time at all aren't going to receive a 5-star rating. So I just bit the bullets, went ahead and ordered that kit. Also, it was not the cheapest. You can get these tune-up kits for these old Fords, for total thing, just what I got there for $32. I guarantee you're going to have a problem because they're going to be cheaply made. But this here was about $53.95 or something like that. Okay, so I've been working this over. We've gone through the process, put all new wires on where necessary, and reused only 2 wires that I can see from this side. Now, obviously, I'm not going to leave this a mess. I'm going to go ahead and zip tie all that up nice and neatly. And I've got one last wire, which comes off of the push button down to engage the solenoid. I've got to route that correctly and then get that tied onto that button right there. And you can see here's the delco alternator. I've got all new wires on the one-wire alternator going up to the ammeter and also back to the battery. That's just about it. I'm going to make this final connection right here on the solenoid. It's this large black wire. I changed the gauges too. I put a lot heavier gauge on parts that are going to consume a little electricity or pass some current, like the output of the alternator. So yeah, we're just about ready to put a temporary tank on it. See if we can get a little gas in, see if it'll fire up without changing any of the electrical devices. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try firing it up with all the old ignition components. Me and my son been working on motorcycles for years and years, working on these old tractors and all that kind of stuff. Not commercially, just for ourselves, just because it's fun. And we've made temporary gas tanks out of just about everything from a paint thinner can to Freon jugs to whatever. So you can use just about anything you want to make a temporary tank. However, enter a very good friend of mine that happens to have a lawnmower repair shop in town. And when that gentleman gets into the picture, you have the benefit of sometimes being the beneficiary of a deluxe plastic gas tank that actually has a 12-volt fuel pump inside it. Now I'm not going to be using a fuel pump. I don't need the fuel pump, but I need to put an access into the bottom of this tank simply because it doesn't have a petcock off the bottom. I took a vent off of another tank and I'm going to press fit that right into the end or right off of the other side above the carburetor. And that's going to give me a very good temporary fuel tank. And guess what? It ain't gonna rust. So when you pop the little air vent out, it'll have a rubber grommet. It's gonna take like a ½ inch or a 17/32 hole. Just drill that hole into the side of the plastic tank, poke the grommet in, and then take this fella right here. I probably should put a little bit of lubricant on that right there, but I'm just gonna go ahead and see if I can force it right in there. Oh boy, it's kind of tough. I'm gonna have to really squeeze on it to get it in there. Okay, you all saw me just grunt like crazy and I couldn't get it popped in. I'm almost embarrassed to tell you, I put just a little drip of oil on that metal part and that thing just popped in just absolutely perfectly. So right now we have a 90-degree shutoff and we're going to route a temporary fuel line right down to the carburetor. Well, we're not going to use the unnecessary fuel pump. Went ahead and put a zip tie on there. For those of you guys that are fortunate enough to have a handy-dandy zip tie tensioning tool, and scrunch it down pretty good and tight, pretty snug, and it's got automatic cut. Give her a flip with this right here, and it cuts the end off. So that's good and secure, but we're not going to use this very long. This is just to see if it'll run. This fancy little valve that I took off of that other one, this is the off position right here crossways. This actually has a 1/4 inch OD copper line going down into this fitting right here. That fitting right there is like a 5/16 threaded brake line fitting. So we just essentially eliminated that steel brake line and used those double flares to connect the fuel line. So that's what we got for temporary. I got one more wire to hook up, and then we're going to see if it'll pop off. See if we made any changes at all by cleaning up all the electric before we do any of the ignition components. First thing I do is put a little fuel in it and make sure this fitting I popped in the bottom of the tank over there is not going to leak. This could be a whole wasted effort. You never know. Yeah, I put 1.5 gallons in or so. I'm right up above the top of that right there, so I'm going to keep my eye on it and see if it's going to dribble any. If it's going to dribble any, I got to scrap this idea and go back with something different. Now's the time to tell you I used a handy dandy UEI. This is an HVAC service tool. It's a clamp-on ammeter, but it's also a digital volt-ohm-meter. It does everything, measures temperature with a thermocouple probe and everything. And it also measures diodes, capacitors, everything except for DC amps. It doesn't do DC amps. But at any rate, I went ahead and measured the primary coil resistance, and my primary coil resistance is 1.7 ohms. That, in my estimation, is not going to require the resistor to cut it down before it goes into the distributor. So I've got a 1.7 on the primary coil, and the secondary coil, which is the BATT terminal or positive terminal to the center portion of the coil, I read 7.6 thousand ohms. So that's 7,600 ohms resistance on the secondary coil. And that should be a hot enough spark. It should be adequate. I might have to go back to my notes and double check, but I'm almost certain that's just fine. One thing that I thought of after I put the positive terminal on is I always try to remember to always let the negative be the last one that I put on. Because if you connect this first and then you're attaching the positive and then you accidentally hit the cowl or something metallic with your wrench, you're going to complete that circuit from positive to ground because the ground is connected. And you'll arc, spark, burn your wrench, maybe blow a little sparks in your face or something. So I always do the positive post first, then do this right here, because if you come into contact with the ground with the wrench, it makes no difference at all. I'll put complete information in the description, but this is a video that's about 3 years old that I'm just now getting around to editing. Now I don't know why, but I made this into a 2-part video, so it's going to be ending abruptly just right about now. So hey, it's Trackman 44, and I'm out of here.